I was expelled from Chile.
And I didn't know anybody here.
It was very difficult, especially for the children.
Clients don't know how our system works. Most people go forward into what is a very complicated process without the help of an individual that understands the law.
They were asking me many questions.
Most people are not ready to flee in a second.
Why is that nobody likes me or wants me?
And when people are hopeless, they're going to move. It's been the history of mankind.
It relates not just to Central America, it relates to the American position on refugees and asylum seekers from around the world.
I'm Kim Clark.
And I'm Pat Werhane.
We go out into the world to look at everything.
Topics such as food deserts, wage theft, and recidivism in jails.
Access to healthcare, education, welfare, major issues we face at home and around the world today.
Come search with us for answers to these issues and more
as we discovered new answers to today's big questions.
Hello, and again, welcome to Big Questions. I'm Pat Werhane. Before the United States was a nation, immigrants and asylees came to the shores of America to find peace and a better life for themselves and their families. More than 2 centuries ago, Benjamin Franklin worried that too many German immigrants would swamp America's predominantly British culture. In the mid-1800s, Irish immigrants were scorned as lazy drunks, not to mention Roman Catholics. And at the turn of the century, a wave of new immigrants, Polish, Italians, Russian Jews, were believed to be too different ever to assimilate into American life. The list goes on and on. And we can't forget that the ancestors of most African Americans were forcibly brought here. In this episode, we look at the plight of people seeking refuge or asylum in the United States today. The same fears are raised about immigrants from Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia as they were for other immigrant groups of the past. The big question is, who is American and who bestows that title?
I was living my dreams in Guatemala. I was working as a doctor in a village that really needed a doctor.
I am originally from Chile. I am a survivor of torture by the military government at that time, headed by the infamous General Augusto Pinochet.
I am a Congolese from Congo Democratic. I was affected by the war in Congo in 1996, 97, and 98. And in 98, I decided to flee from Congo.
Last year, I believe, the United States resettled approximately 70,000 refugees across the country. And the State Department has a humanitarian mission to help refugees who are fleeing war and persecution. It's our job as a resettlement agency to assist these newly arriving refugees who have been screened and approved by the State Department to come to the United States. And our agency welcomes around 500 new refugees each year.
Organizations like Refugee One, the Heartland Alliance, Sukasa, and other groups work with refugees arriving in Chicago. And our support system for refugees is one of the best in the country, but far from perfect.
When somebody applies for asylum, I would say even as recently as a couple of years ago, they would receive an interview date with the asylum officers in approximately 6 to 8 weeks. In contrast, now our new asylum applicants, many of them have not heard yet after 2 years when they're going to be interviewed by an asylum officer. So it went from 8 weeks to it's kind of open-ended. People aren't hearing about when they're going to be interviewed. So that's an incredible challenge for people who, particularly, our clients don't know how our system works.
In general, asylum seekers must apply for asylum benefits within their first year in the United States. There are some limited exceptions to that, but it is certainly best if the application's made in the first year. I think the important thing for individuals to understand is that the vast majority of asylum seekers are not represented by counsel. There's a very small percentage of asylum seekers that actually have an attorney to represent them. And so most people go forward into what is a very complicated process without the help of an individual that understands the law.
I was in the process of getting the papers. I do remember talking with my lawyer, even telling him that I could not continue with the process because it was just so hard for me. And he didn't speak Spanish, so I had an interpreter. So just meeting with him was very hard because I had to talk about what's going on in Guatemala. And I didn't go into the details of what happened to me about my torture. So I told him, I think I'm going to stop this whole thing because I just want to go. And he said, Matilde, if you go, if you leave the country, and then if something happens to you and you want to come back, it will be against you.
It's a lot of worry, a lot of concern for our clients particularly, but we're also concerned. I mean, I have some confidence that it's going to change eventually because it has to. And I'm also aware that because of the influx of families and unaccompanied minors at the border, that has really drawn resources from the immigration system to attend to those unaccompanied children. And so, for example, we have 2 immigration judges out of 7 in Chicago that are now seeing non-detained asylum seekers, such as our clients. So 2 out of 7, it used to be 7 out of 7. So everything is very delayed, and it's very disheartening for our clients to hear that their asylum hearing has been postponed until 2019. All they know is that it's another 4 or 5 years until they can hope to bring their families over here.
We had a very good, difficult time. We had 2 children. One was 3 years and a half. Another one was close to 2 years. And my wife was pregnant. My wife did not know how to speak English. I spoke little English. We had no vehicle, and we had to start working. This was a big challenge. She delivered in April. We had to start working in July, understand 3 months. And I started in July just to pay rent, nothing else, only to pay rent. And I wanted to go to school. But a sudden, I was told, no, we just take care of you for 3 months. And after 3 months, you have to go to work. You have to start working, and your wife. It was very difficult. Just working, not to save money, not to gain anything, but to be able to pay rent and cover for bills. It was too cold, and we did not yet know the first time how to take care of this cold weather. It was very difficult, especially for the children.
Both refugees and asylum seekers need to meet the same basic definition, legal definition, to obtain benefits. They must show that they either suffered past persecution or have a well-founded fear of future persecution on account of their race, their religion, their nationality, their political opinion, or their membership in a particular social group. The main difference between them is procedure. So refugees are processed abroad, and asylum seekers apply for their benefits at the border of the United States or within the United States. And the other major difference between refugees and asylees is there's no quota for asylum seekers. However, there is a quota annually for refugee.
Oftentimes, because of the immediate danger they're facing, sometimes a recent escape from captivity, they are relying on human smugglers and false documents. Most people are not ready to flee in a second, and most people have not prepared for this. And oftentimes take a long, vulnerable journey to get here, and on arriving in the United States, they have to apply for political asylum. Where we come in is providing health services, mental health services, an array of social services for a population who are not eligible for any particular benefits while they have a pending asylum case and are facing enormous hardship.
I didn't know anybody here, and I didn't know English. So those were very big things for me, like how is that I'm going to a place where I don't know anybody? And just arriving to the airport, they were asking me many questions, and then they took me to one of the rooms apart because I don't know, I just say, I wasn't lying, I just say that yes, I was a doctor, and they say, well, we do not believe you. And telling you the truth, at that moment I was like, okay, I want to return to my country, so just give me the passport again and I will go back. Having me in a room and then just interrogating me was very hard because that brought memories about my torturers, and I had a flashback there, and they didn't know what to do with me.
They oftentimes don't know anybody here, so have nowhere to live. They initially are unable to work because they're not granted a work permit. And of course, they have an enormous burden of trauma, both physical, psychological, and at their moment of greatest need, they're separated from their families, their communities, and their friends. So the networks that we develop over a lifetime that we can draw on when we need them, you know, they're separated from. So it's really a vulnerable population.
The detention camps ruled by the military government at that time. I spent 2.5 years in those camps, for 1 or 2 months in interrogation and torture centers. And finally I was expelled from Chile. I couldn't live in my own country, and I couldn't get to my country for many years, about 17, 18 years. And when I was expelled, I got refugee status and asylum, but I couldn't get a job. The only reason, as I realized, because I had a political refugee status, they considered us at that time communist. Whether you were a communist member of the party or not, we were all communist. It was difficult for me to come here. I mean, immigration or the State Department didn't accept me here because, as I said before, we were all considered communists. I was called here to work at Evanston Hospital at that time. So after that, a year I was there, I was transferred to the medical school here in Chicago, and I worked there for about 12 years.
A lot of immigrants have a real entrepreneurial spirit. They often want to create the American dream. They want to own a home. They want to build a business. They want to provide opportunities for other people, especially if they feel themselves that they have been provided with opportunities. Often there's a great pairing between refugee communities and the religious organizations I see support them. Even if they don't share the same religion, it's a values system that they share. And often very strong connections are made there. Many of the refugee, asylum, and other immigrant families I work with place a strong emphasis on education, which is often appreciated by the communities that they join. And they are often very community focused because they've left so much behind.
The first day, I did not believe I was in the USA. You know, I lived quite a while in refugee camps with no hope at all, and I had no ambition, and everything for me was like dark. I couldn't do anything. I was just stuck. I did not know even what would happen for my children. Like, they had no future at all. It was like a dream. It was very, very a historical day in our life. And now we are living somewhere whereby we can express ourselves, go to school, take the kids to school, and improve our life. And sleep, at least sleep. You know, nobody's behind you. Peace of mind.
It was hard because for me it was the first kind of reaction about what you see about the United States in films or what you see in reality out in the street. And it was the first time I could see some poverty, a lot of Central Americans at that time that were coming, Guatemalans, Salvadorians, a lot of Mexicans too there. And I could see the conditions why they were living because I was trying to look for an apartment where to live. I could see that was not everything like we were seeing in all these Hollywood films, that everything is great, that life is so good. And it was hard, it was difficult. People, I could see they were not very friendly in the neighborhood where I was living, except for some Latin Americans which speak Spanish, that they knew I speak Spanish, they were talking to me. So that was a difficult adjustment initially, because I didn't look for services either at the time. Because you know, for me everything was new, was different, but still, I thought that I didn't have any services I could get help with.
Before the families even arrive, we receive a bio and information on the families. We know when they're coming, which airplane they're coming on, which day, and so our wheels set in motion before they even arrive, and we find an apartment for them. We furnish the apartment and make sure that the kitchen is stocked and there's a warm meal waiting for them. We pick them up from the airport, we bring them to their new home.
I entered via Los Angeles, and then from there I went to Arizona the same day. I didn't have anything with me, and the person who picked me up, she drove me to a house that until now I don't know exactly what kind of house was this. I remember the person who was in charge of the house that night said, you will go to the back and please do not make any noise because everybody's sleeping. And I was like, of course, I will not be. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to talk, and I will not do any noise. And once I entered the room, I could not see anything, and I was just terrified because the whole thing of being tortured and in the dark, and I was just looking for a light. And I do remember seeing, just sitting down and looking at the lights in the street.
After somebody has been tortured by their governments, there is a real lack of trust of almost anyone, but particularly people from their own countries. They don't know at the beginning where people stand, whether they're supporting government practices, which is persecuting their group, or not. And so the safest thing to do is to, be isolated, actually. And that's a particular problem that people face, and that's where the Kovler Center is able to be helpful.
I think of many of the asylum seekers that I've represented were seeking asylum based on past persecution because of a political opinion that they expressed. And just the expression of that opinion, or the practice of a religion that wasn't permitted, or any of the other countless reasons that I've had asylum seekers seek protection here, it took courage to do what they did. It took courage then to leave and come to a new place. And that goes for other immigrants, not just asylum seekers and refugees. As somebody that studied abroad for brief periods of time, I learned a lot from those experiences about what it feels like to be isolated from what you know, and the language you're used to, and the systems you're used to, and to open yourself up to something brand new. And it's frightening, and these people have done it anyway.
They had explained to us that we're going to find an organization, like an agency, helping us. I came with a little idea of who they were. And I found somebody who spoke Swahili. He came from Kenya. He's Ethiopian by the name Ephraim, and he was like the manager of the agency after the director. And when I heard him speak in Swahili, it was a good connection. And he's the one who introduced us to everybody. They were very much kind, and we felt like we are home. The first day we went to the agency, like 2 days after we came.
Why is that nobody likes me or wants me? The only person that I would say was so good with me was the lawyer. He was really, I can see that he has compassion. And he was understanding me too. When I came to su casa, I would say yes. Then I could say, yes, finally I can see good people here.
I saw the Cultural Center there as a good center that would help me precisely on my trauma caused by being a survivor of torture. I've been becoming sort of an outreach even for the Cultural Center to talk to people, and that's part of my healing process too. Everywhere they have been applying torture, in every country they do exactly the same techniques that are even taught, even that are people educated, that we have them even here in the United States, the School of the Americas. The process of healing, of recovering, of trying to understand, that I could work and I could be talking as a survivor with the health professional, telling them the way they should understand and learn how to treat when they are survivors of torture, because some of them don't even know really how to do it.
Well, my family and I went to Ellis Island really shortly after 9/11, after it reopened after 9/11. And there's a museum there that is about the history of immigration. And as I walked through the museum, what struck me was that really when immigration first began to the United States, at least as we know it, there were very open doors. And I remember reading in that museum one of the first issues that our country faced where they were trying to prohibit people from coming in were to address the issue of communicable diseases. So they set up a law prohibiting coming into the United States if you had certain communicable diseases, and then they set up procedures. And those same rules, the procedures have changed as diseases have changed, but the rule is still there. Our immigrants are still required to go through medical screenings before they come into the United States. In the 1980s, with the war on drugs, additional scrutiny put onto people that had past drug abuse, drug use, drug possession, drug trafficking. And after 9/11, it was terrorism. So it is a history of what we have feared.
Successive waves of immigrants have kept our country demographically young, enriched our culture, and added to our productive capacity as a nation, enhancing our influence in the world.
America is a great country, and I really thank this country very much. But people don't see the situation the same way. Some have no idea who is a refugee. To understand the people coming here, they have to understand they are people like everybody. They are people who were forced by the situation, not their own will to live and come to this country. There are people who need to be loved, to be good welcomed. There are people who are trying to see how they can recover back. And they wish also to live like everybody. What I can talk to the audiences is to take these people with more consideration. There are people who are smart. There are people who know what is life. And there are people who want also to be somebody in life.
Obviously, the U.S. government should control the borders to keep out anyone who intends to commit terrorist acts. The problem is not that we're letting in too many people into the United States, but that the government has failed to keep the wrong people out. We can stop terrorists from entering the United States without closing our borders or without reducing the number of hardworking, peaceful immigrants and refugees who settle here. We should not allow America's tradition of welcoming immigrants become yet another casualty of the need to protect ourselves and our way of life.
And around the world, almost 60 million have been displaced by conflict and persecution. Nearly 20 million of them are refugees, and more than half are children. Their numbers are growing and accelerating every single day on every continent. In 2014, an average of 42,500 people became refugees, asylum seekers, or internally displaced persons every single day. Yet, even as this tragedy unfolds, some of the countries most able to help are shutting their gates to people seeking asylum. Borders are closing, pushbacks are increasing, avenues for legitimate escape are fading away. We have reached a moment of truth.
One thing about newly arrived immigrants and refugees and asylees are that they often come with almost nothing. And so the needs are great, but they're also expansive. If you don't know where to start with agencies already providing these services. But sometimes it's as simple as a new refugee arrives in your city and they need an apartment and the apartment needs to be painted. And you paint the apartment and you set them up with a blender and a toaster and the things that we take for granted, but that refugees may not have.